And, what is noticeable is just how marginal all these seats are, that the average majority, I think, has gone down to about 5 or 6,000, where it was more than double that before in the last parliament. So that means really every MP is on tenterhooks for another switch.
So we've talked about the 334 new MPs who are heading to Parliament. Of course, on top of that, we've got a new Prime Minister, a new opposition and a brand new electoral landscape. Let's get some thoughts from experienced political observers. Journalist Carolyn Quinn. Good morning, Carolyn.
Good morning.
And Adam Boulton, co-presenter, of course, of Times Radio's politics programme Sunday morning. Morning, Adam.
Hello there.
I want to get a sense from you two, first of all. Between you, and I mean this in the nicest terms, I'm not suggesting anything about your age before we get this wrong, but you've covered so many elections and so many people have talked about how this has been a very different election. Carolyn, would you say that's your assessment?
Oh, definitely. I think just the facts and figures of the vote share and the records that have been broken with this one. I think what really struck me was the fragmentation of the vote, the fact that it has scattered far and wide, and it does seem as if tactical voting went on. People who were determined to remove a Conservative MP in their area, they have done that by voting for the next alternative. So the Lib Dems have obviously benefited hugely from that, going up to 71 seats. That's their highest number of MPs since 1923. And I'm sure when Ed Davey was throwing himself off doing bungee jumping and going down water slides, he wouldn't have even dreamed of that sort of number. So I think that's the thing that has really struck me, and the fact that with a tiny vote share, seats can be seized if they've been targeted properly, and Labour and the Lib Dems certainly have done that. They've got really small shares of the vote, but because they concentrated their attention on particular winnable seats in their view, they've won through.
Adam?
Yeah, I would agree entirely with that. I think the volatility of the electorate is what's really striking. I mean, let's think we went from a very strong Boris Johnson victory in 2019 to a very strong Labour victory now. And, what is noticeable is just how marginal all these seats are, that the average majority, I think, has gone down to about 5 or 6,000, where it was more than double that before in the last parliament. So that means really every MP is on tenterhooks for another switch. They certainly know that they're not moving into what used to be called a safe seat or a job for life. That is right down. And then, just hearing your statistic at the end there, that more than half of the House of Commons are going to be new faces. I mean, that is, truly remarkable. And I think it shows that, we moved into a new political era. We're no longer in the, Labour do it for a bit and then the Conservatives do it for a bit more and then Labour do it for a bit. We are now in, a much less predictable political environment. Of course, Sir Keir Starmer is saying that he's going to get rid of some of that chaos, but we shall see.
And also, I wonder, Chloe and Adam, whether, this will now reinforce those calls for PR. We know, don't we, that every time governments are getting prepared to go to an election, then they might embrace the idea of proportional representation and changing the way that elections happen. And then they get in with a majority and they forget about it. But if you look at Reform and you look at the Lib Dems, Reform have got 14.3% of the vote and the Lib Dems 12.2%. Reform have got 5 MPs and Lib Dems have got 71. So they will surely be clamouring now for change, won't they, like often happens in the past?
Although the Lib Dems won't, will they? They've been moaning for ages. They'll be saying, this is great.
Absolutely. That's what I mean.
Exactly.
They want it. They want it until they get there.
Exactly. It'd be really interesting. I want to ask you both as well about, we're hearing that the Prime Minister is going to hold a news conference this morning after this first cabinet meeting. A Number 10 source is quoted as saying it will show a new style under Sir Keir Starmer and his attempt to demonstrate accountability. Adam, what do you think that might look like?
Well, I think that's very good news for a start, because the fact of the matter is, since after Tony Blair, successive prime ministers have really eroded the automatic access that they grant to the press, and doing interviews has become much more either of a favour or more likely circumscribed to a soundbite given on a pool basis. And if Sir Keir Starmer is actually planning, remember in the Tony Blair era, we actually had monthly news conferences which went on for an hour and a half, which Mr. Blair in the end did without. He didn't dodge it. If it was a difficult day, he still put himself up. And crucially, I think he did that not just for the Westminster pack, but foreign journalists were invited and they were able to raise their subjects. And I think that was much greater accountability than we've seen since. Now, I don't know if this is just going to be a one-off in the sort of afterglow of a famous victory, but if this new government is going to establish press relations on a more open basis rather than playing favourites or granting interviews as favours, I think that would be extremely healthy for our democracy.
Didn't Tony Blair in the end called it his masochism strategy, didn't he? As he was getting out to meet the public and take lots of questions. So I wonder whether it will get that far.
And I wonder, Carolyn, as well, if this all feeds into Keir Starmer's thing that he's been talking about rebuilding trust with the public and with the electorate and trying to, at the very least, appear more open and accountable.
Oh, yeah, it was really striking, wasn't it? That speech that he gave on the steps of Number 10, where he was repeatedly saying this is a government of service, our work is urgent, we start today, and talking of stability and steering the ship to calmer waters. He certainly has got a job on his hands, hasn't he? And I'm sure Adam will agree that, he comes into an economy that is far less benign than it was to the one that Tony Blair came into in 97. He's got a lot of reassurance to give. People who may have voted Labour, not really sure, but willing to give them a try. He needs to really show that he can do it. It's not exactly the wild men of 1924 coming in, Ramsay MacDonald having to show that, farmers and manual workers can run a government. But, there is a lot of reassurance now that's needed.
Do you think, Adam, we're likely to see a different Starmer and Reeves, for example? Because it's been so cautious, hasn't it? Not wanting to dent their lead in the polls. I just wonder if we're now going to see the real them, or is that what we've seen already?
I think we're already seeing a different Keir Starmer. He was much more confident in his speech on the doorstep. And one of the things that he has done, which is different, is he's really prepared for this. He's ready. That's why they're having a cabinet meeting today. That's why they're having a news conference. He's got to hit the ground running with NATO next week. And, although they didn't take anything for granted, they had clearly thought through the messages they wanted to send out.